Hello biscuit lovers. Today I'm going to read you the story of Mr. Richard T. Him, there. He said I could read this story if he could sit there and stare at me the whole time to make me really uncomfortable. So, here we go. Mr. Richard Edwin Cuthbert T. was an extraordinarily posh sort of fellow. Cousin once removed to the twice-borrowed mother of the 5th Earl of the second cousin of the great King T, who ruled the land of Biscuit from 1842 until 1906. Unfortunately, the knowledge of his somewhat complicated ancestry had left Richard a little too grand for the likes of anyone else. I'm afraid he had to make up his own rules in life, due to having very little guidance. Rules which were mostly not acceptable to anyone else in the 20th century. This was one of the main reasons Richard lived alone, although he lives here now, unfortunately. Sadly abandoned as a child in the 1970s by his long-suffering parents, Richard grew up alone in Crumbleton Manor. The only regret his parents ever had in life was giving him that historical book about kings when he was 5. This was the first time he realised he was of royal blood, and it went straight to his head and has remained there ever since. It really has. Can you see him laughing? Crumbleton Manor is the largest mansion house for miles and miles around, with impressive grounds on top of a very, very tall hill on the outskirts of Crumbleton. It is said to have large turrets and flags and can be seen from space. Richard has somewhat peculiar taste, and every room is decorated in an imaginative regal print, with many velvet drapes and bold bright colours. He has his own loud artwork on the walls and many, many pictures of himself. The bright and cheerful decor did not, however, reflect his personality in any way at all. Even the local designer and fashion guru, Florence Bombiscuit de Bowen, was utterly shocked by the colour matches when he visited one day. And that really does say something. No disrespect. However, Richard lived there happily. Well, as happily as possible for such a fellow. This story is about the day that Richard left his home and caught a bus into town. A very unusual occurrence, but then something unusual had occurred that day. In Crumbletown, about a mile away, was a grocery shop run by a family of fortune cookies. It was a lovely shop, it really was. It sold everything from sweets to U-bends, and it just happened that old Mrs. Cookie, the elder of the Cookies, knew Richard's mother from many years ago. Apparently they left an exceptionally large sum of money to the Cookies to provide for Richard in their absence. The money had run out a long time ago, though. Richard was very demanding. He still is. Although unbeknown to the Cookies, Richard still had absolutely thousands of pounds stuffed in various mattresses in the very, very many bedrooms he owned. Maybe his parents didn't mean to be away for so long, who knows? But old Mrs. Cookie somehow still felt responsible for him, and she took it upon herself to be a caring guardian from afar. This said, she carried a very heavy box of food and supplies to his home every single Monday, and had done for the past 40-odd years. She walked with a pull-along trailer and her stick, through the lanes, over the meadows, and up the very large hill to his home. As the years went on, Mrs. Cookie the elder grew older and older and older. In fact, come to think about it, she had always been quite old since time began. Richard, being Richard though, was quite selfish and believed it was his God-given right to have this personal service. From a very early age, he did not fully appreciate Miss Cookie, not one little bit. She had a tailor visit his house every 6 months to deliver suits and cravats. She organised a gardener to prune the roses and cut the lawns. She even arranged for a housemaid to clean the manor overnight on a daily basis. She also prepared his breakfast and neatly laid out his clothes in his dressing room before leaving at 5 a.m. so she wouldn't be there when he woke up. Well, you wouldn't want to be, really, would you? Of course, there was no communication at all between Richard and these people, and that was exactly how he liked it. Every Friday they would visit his home for their wages, and he would just throw wads of cash at them as if they were his servants. He was far too good for the likes of them. Upon this particular Monday in question, Mrs. Cookie had not arrived. Richard was fuming as he looked out of the window, starving. He tried shouting down the magic telephone, which had always bought him anything he ever wanted. There was no answer. He sat in his leather armchair, fiddling with his moustache for a good few hours. After he could twiddle no more, and had looked at his pocket watch several hundred times, he let out a very large huff. By 3 p.m. he was so furious he left the grand house. He stomped down the road and stood at the bus stop, waving his stick frantically in the air. The bus stopped and Richard waltzed on. Before sitting down, he carefully lay a white silk handkerchief upon the seat to protect his posh bottom. Richard's tummy rumbled all the way into town, which did not make him a happy biscuit. His mood, by the time they arrived, was one which can only be described as hangry. Off he got at the bus stop in town without saying as much as a thank you to the driver. He barged past 2 old ladies waiting to get on, sending one of them spinning around her shopping trolley at a very fast speed. The other flew backwards in a very unfortunate manner and landed upon her older lady biscuit bottom with a thud. You would wonder if his large polished wooden cane with brass ends was a walking aid or indeed just a weapon for things that got in his way. Having never seen him limp, I would guess the latter. Richard then stomped across the road, forcing several cars to stop. His mood had not improved, and his presence engulfed the street. Getting madder by the minute, he stormed into the fortune cookie store. Unfortunately for them, I may add. "Where is your old missus?" he shouted in surprise, to the surprise of everyone in a 10-mile radius. "For she has not delivered my luncheons for this week, and it has gone 3 o'clock. His face had now turned very, very red, and he cared not for the feelings of the small cookie who sat before him on a very tall chair behind the counter. Ruth, one of the youngest fortune cookies, was an unlucky trainee who was working on this busy Monday. She was very shocked to see this posh, shouty man billowing down at her, for he had never been in the shop before. Then she suddenly realised who he was. This was the strange, shouty, posh biscuit from Crumbleton Manor. He had been the talk of the cookies' dinner table for many, many years. I'm sorry, Mr. T," she squeaked. "Grandmamma is not very well today. She has a bad back." Suddenly, steam blew out of his ears, and he stamped his posh foot. "Back, whack, crackety, crack," he roared, his face turning even redder. "Why in heaven's name did she not send someone else with my hamper?" He banged his stick on the table. "Do you know, one has not eaten since 6 a.m, when one had an extremely small breakfast. I didn't even like that," he muttered. Ruth, although small and normally very quiet and placid, she started feeling very angry inside. A fire began burning deep inside of her as she suddenly rocketed into the air like some kind of crazy firework. "Grandmama is 194 years old," she screamed. "Mr. T, I do not think she'll be able to do this service for you much longer." She paused as a bit of calm reigned over her. "Last week," she said slowly and calmly, "a gigantic tin of beans fell out of your box. She chased it all the way down Crumbly Hill, slipped over on a worm, and jolly well hurt her back. And do you know what?" she shouted, feeling very angry again. Richard's eye monocle was steamed up at the sheer boredom of her rant, and he rolled his eyes. "What?" he mumbled, as a big crowd of biscuits watched in disbelief from the door. "She jolly well still walked back up that hill to deliver your box, that's what." "Well, what a silly old fool," he declared, looking around the shop. There was a long awkward pause as Ruth Cookie suddenly forgot her bravery. A bigger crowd of biscuits gathered around the door. No noise like this had ever been heard before in this usually sleepy town. The Crumbletown population was mostly kind, thoughtful. They were certainly not used to this grumpiness. "Oh, well, make me up a box then," he boomed, "and then you can get your chauffeur to take me home." He then threw a large amount of cash at Ruth as she hastily wheeled her chair ladder over to the tall shelves and began packing a large box of groceries. Not daring to tell him she did not have a chauffeur, she called the local taxi firm Quick Sharp. Duncan Biscuit turned up 2 minutes later in his Ford Capri. Duncan was a very cheerful chappie who brightened up the biscuits of Crumbleton's lives in many ways. Richard marched out of the shop without even saying thank you. He bowled over some onlookers as if they were skittles on his way. "Take me home, young man," instructed Richard, waving his stick and throwing the box in the back of the car. The journey was a quiet one, mainly because the G-force from the ride took Richard's breath away. Richard had also turned a distasteful shade of green. He never realised before this day that he suffered from travel sickness. Upon arrival to the Grand Mansion, Richard stumbled out of the car. He could not really see straight anymore, and his legs were not that straight either. Duncan carried the heavy box of groceries up the stone steps and placed it carefully on the porch. Richard T. did not say a word of thanks, but unsteadily slapped £1,000 into Duncan's sports cap and tipped his grand hat to him. It gave a whole new meaning to giving someone a bunch of fives. Duncan could not believe his luck. He had never in his life received such great rewards for his driving. He ran down the steps in so much excitement he nearly hyperventilated. Richard T. closed the door. "Silly boy," he uttered, as he sat down in his armchair. and opened a new jar of caviar. The colour slowly returned to his cheeks. How someone could change so many colours in one day never really fazed him. Relaxing into the chair, he felt sort of happy to be alone again. He certainly wouldn't be venturing into town again anytime soon. Everyone was just so rude. The end. Hope you enjoyed it. Visit the website www.thebiscuitsofcrumbleton.co.uk for more information. And it's goodbye from me and Richard. See you soon.